every continent on the face of the earth. Welcome to LSR Late Night. LSR Late Night is a production of Okie Frontier Studios and LSR Radio from the Missouri-Kansas border. Hope you're doing well tonight on this evening. It's a stormy evening here. And tonight's show is not to incite any racism, to hurt any feelings. Just a simple look. Another painting, if you will, of the history of the America West, the America frontier, on an event not many people know of. And while I spent a lot of time thinking about how to bring this story up, because I've known about it for years, I've been to where we're going to be discussing tonight, but let's see, I just something drove me, something pushed me, something deep inside said, you must do this. And the last Scout show was not the place to do it, but for LSR Late Night, it is a story to go over. And the story that we're going over tonight is a little unknown story to most Americans from out west, and it involved the largest mass execution ever sanctioned by the United States government, and still today it exists. Yep, what we're talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is short term is the Mankato 38. But we're going to take just a quick, brief history. We're not going to dive into every detail there is about it, just an overall view, so that you can go and Google the Mankato 38 on your own after listening to this and find out more if you're interested. The Dakota War of 1862, also known as the Sioux Uprising, Dakota Uprising, the Sioux Outbreak of 1862, the Dakota Conflict, the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862, or Little Crow's War, was an armed conflict between the United States and several bands of Dakota, also known as the Eastern Sioux. The outbreak between the settlers and the Dakota broke out on August 17, 1862, along the Minnesota River in southwest Minnesota, 4 years after its admission as a state. During the war, the Dakota made extensive attacks on hundreds of settlers and immigrants, which caused many to flee the area. Intense desire for immediate revenge ended with soldiers capturing hundreds of Dakota men and interning their families. A military tribunal quickly tried the men, sentencing 39 to death for their crimes. The mass execution of 38 Dakota men was conducted on December 26, 1862 in Mankato, Minnesota. It was the largest mass hanging in United States history. Throughout the late 1850s, treaty violations by the United States and late or unfair annuity payments by Indian agents caused increasing hunger and hardship among the Dakotas. Traders that traded with the Dakota previously had demanded that the government give the annuity payments directly to them, introducing the possibility of unfair dealing between the agents and the traders to the exclusion of the Dakota. In mid-1862, the Dakota demanded the annuities directly from their agent, a gentleman named Thomas J. Galbraith, The traders refused to provide any more supplies on credit under those conditions, and negotiations reached an impasse. It was then, on August 17, 1862, when one young Dakota with a hunting party of 3 others killed 5 settlers while on a hunting expedition. That night, a council of Dakota decided to attack settlements throughout the Minnesota River Valley to try to drive whites out of the area. There has never been an official report on the number of settlers killed, although in President Abraham Lincoln's second annual address, he said that no fewer than 800 men, women, and children had died. Over the next several months, continued battles of the Dakota against settlers and later the United States Army ended with the surrender of most of the Dakota bands. By late December 1862, U.S. soldiers had taken captive more than 1,000 Dakota, including women, children, and elderly men, in addition to warriors who were interned in jails in Minnesota. After trials and sentencing by a military court, 38 Dakota men were hanged on December 26, 1862, in the largest one-day mass execution in American history. Well, there is the start. The trials of the Dakota were conducted unfairly in a variety of ways. The evidence was sparse, the tribunal was biased, the defendants were unrepresented in unfamiliar proceedings conducted in a foreign language, and authority for convening the tribunal was lacking. More fundamentally, neither the military commission nor the reviewing authorities recognized that they were dealing with the aftermath of a war fought with a sovereign nation, and that the men who surrendered were entitled to treatment in accordance with that status. On September 28, 1862, 2 days after the surrender at Camp Release, a commission of military officers established by Henry Sibley began trying Dakota men accused of participating in the war. Several weeks later, the trials were moved to the lower agency, where they were held in one of the only buildings left standing, Trader Francois Labat's summer kitchen. As weeks passed, cases were handled with increasing speed. On November 5th, the commission completed its work. 392 prisoners were tried, 303 were sentenced to death, and 16 were given prison terms. President Lincoln and government lawyers then reviewed the trial transcripts of all 303 men. As Lincoln would later explain to the U.S. Senate, anxious to not act with so much clemency as to encourage another outbreak on one hand, nor with so much severity as to be real cruelty on the other, I ordered a careful examination of the records of the trials to be made, in view of first ordering the execution of such as had been proved guilty of violating females. When only 2 men were found guilty of rape, Lincoln expanded the criteria to include those who had participated in massacres of civilians rather than just battles. He then made his final decision and forwarded a list of 39 names to Silby. And yes, it's called the Mankato 38, or Mankato 38, I'm sorry. But originally, 39 were brought up to be executed. At some point, President Lincoln decided to grant clemency to one of the Indians, one of the Dakota, and so therefore there was only 38 that were hung. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? From a historical standpoint, a lot to take in, but still a story that needs to be told. At 10 a.m. on December 26, 38 Dakota prisoners were led to a scaffold specially constructed for their execution. One had been given a reprieve at the last minute. An estimated 4,000 spectators crammed the streets of Mankato and surrounding land. Colonel Stephen Miller, charged with keeping the peace in the days leading up to the hanging, had declared martial law and had banned the sale and consumption of alcohol within a 10-mile radius of the town. As the men took their assigned places on the scaffold, they sang a Dakota song as white coverings were pulled over their faces, drum beats signaling the start of the execution. The men grasped each other's hands. With a single blow from an axe, the rope that held the platform was cut. Captain William Dully, who had lost several members of his family in the attack on the Lake Chetek settlement, cut the rope. After dangling from the scaffold for a half hour, the men's bodies were cut down and hauled to a shallow mass grave on a sandbar between Mankato's Main Street and the Minnesota River. Before morning, most of the bodies had been dug up and taken by physicians for use as medical cadavers. Following the mass execution on December 26, it was discovered that 2 men had been mistakenly hanged. One who went by the name of Cask reportedly stepped forward when the name Cask was called and was then separated for execution from the other prisoners. The other, Wasichun, was a young white man who had been adopted by the Dakota at an early age. Just before the execution, the chief of the Dakota, Chief Washaba, wrote this: "You have deceived me. You told me that if we followed the advice of General Silby and gave ourselves up to the whites, all would be well. No innocent man would be injured. I have not killed, wounded, or injured a white man or any white persons. I have not participated in the plunder of their property, and yet today I am set apart for execution and must die in a few days, while men who are guilty will remain in prison. My wife is your daughter, my children are your grandchildren. I leave them all in your care and under your protection. Do not let them suffer, and when my children are grown, let them know that their father died because he followed the advice of his chief and without having the blood of a white man to answer for the Great Spirit." And that was the words of Chief Wabasha just before his execution on December 26, 1862. I'll be back to close up right after this.
Say, who gets to make the coffee in your house? Well, you know, more often than not, when it's coffee time in this household, I get to make it. Of course, the fact that my wife lets me make the coffee tells you how amazing Instant Maxwell House must be. And believe me, this really is amazing. It's a completely different kind of coffee. Here, take a look for yourself underneath this magnifying glass. Now you can see it's not a powder, not a grind either, but millions of tiny hollow flavor buds of real coffee, formed this way to capture and preserve that famous Maxwell House flavor. Now, these miracle flavor buds burst instantly the moment you pour in hot water, flooding the pot with that wonderful, good to the last drop flavor. I want to tell you that is real coffee, as delicious as the best cup of coffee you ever have brewed. What's more, with this large jar, you save money, you know. Up to 75 cents compared to 3 pounds of ground coffee means that Instant Maxwell House costs you less per cup. So this is Rex Marshall reminding you, no matter who makes the coffee in your house, the secret of coffee that's good to the very last drop is right in this jar with the stars on top. Instant Maxwell House, the amazing coffee discovery.
Piece of hidden American history that's not much talked about, not well known. But here at LSR Late Night, we try to bring you all that we can. I really do hope you enjoyed it. Research Mankato 38 for yourself. And remember, you can always find me over at We the People, PatriotSoapbox.com, or at We the People's Patriot Soapbox live stream on YouTube. I'm there with She 7 every morning from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern with 4 hours of jam-packed news and commentary. So I hope you will venture over for that and check it out. And you know, it's good to have you here tonight at LSR Late Night, where it's a chance for me to do radio away from politics and other major subjects, to where you never know what we'll be discussing. And be sure and check out playlist for LSR Radio Bio. Try to do so many different ways of radio here at Last Scout Radio, and I hope you enjoy all of it. Be sure, if you would, to share this, hit the like button, subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. So until next time, take care, be safe, and tune in again to LSR Late Night from the Okeechobee Frontier Studios on the Missouri-Kansas border, where storms up above are brewing.